So hopefully we're live now. Everyone, evening. Welcome back to DMC TV. We've got another interesting guest for you tonight, which is David Vance. I've been aware of David's work, his social media activity for a while now. Back in the day, he used to be on the BBC and shows like The Big Questions. We used to get outflanked or have a few people on at once, where he'd give the sort of more right-wing Christian traditionalist view, and he'd have the sort of BBC woke, agenda lambasted at him. But he's great sport. Speaking off camera at the start, really good guy. David, without further ado, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, pleasure to be with you, and thanks for having me on. And just before we start, just to say, when I used to go into the BBC, their main place in Belfast, I used to joke about I'd bring a cross and some a crucifix and garlic to keep away all the evil entities that were in the BBC. And you know something, it didn't even work that well because there's so many of them. But anyway, yes. So myself, well, what can I say? One of the most banned people in Northern Ireland, I'd like to say. Certainly banned from the BBC, banned from Sky, banned from Channel 4, banned from LBC, banned from all the mainstream media. And what was my unspeakable sin? I told the truth. So I've been trying to do that, Dan, since I got into the whole business. I was born in a place called Bestbrook, right on the border, way back in the day. Lived there, family lived there, moved up to Portadown, ended up going to university, getting a job, going to work in England, got married, came back to Northern Ireland, have a family here, I've got grandkids. And during that period, leaving BBC aside, I've developed social media platforms such as on Twitter, which I was taken off back in 2020. I was removed for the unspeakable sin of, oh my God, he went into a garden centre with no mask on, and he laughed about it. Yeah, I did. And would I do it again? Oh, absolutely. But for 2 years, I was taking off X, and then I built up other platforms, Dan. So it was good. That was a plus. And then Elon Musk brought me back in 2022, and the platform's continues to grow. And I just do lots of stuff. You know, I do the social media stuff. I've got a Substack. I do podcasts. I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming out. It's a one-man operation, but there's a lot of stuff coming out from one man. Whether it's all good or not, people can judge. But there's a good audience of you people who seem to enjoy it, you know. So I'm happy with that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, we've got over 260k followers on X. I didn't actually know that you were taken off for a couple of years. So was your account? Did you have to start afresh, or was it actually reinstated from what you had?
So do you know something? I didn't even. It was taken off just like that. And I'm sure that it was linked to the government's clampdown on COVID skeptics, of which I was probably the most prominent here in Northern Ireland. So I think that's what it quite went down. 2 years later, I mean, I'd forgotten about X. I'd moved on. I got a message from a journalist friend of mine, and she said to me, "David, you're back." And I went, "What? I'm back?" And so I logged into my account, and the account had got, I can't remember what the number was, but it came back with like about 120,000 followers, something like that. So I hadn't lost everybody. I kept a good number, and then that's more than doubled. But it was funny because then about a day later, I got an email from Twitter, X, apologizing, which really annoyed me. They apologized for taking me down.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But it's like, well, that's like apologizing for murdering you, you know, because it is. It's like if anyone's ever experienced what it's like to be taken down, it is like it's like you die. It's like, well, they're gone now. They're not there anymore. And it felt like that for maybe about a couple of months back in 2020. And if you remember, that was into the winter of death and illness from COVID that Joe Biden talked about laughably back then. Yeah, exactly. So it was strange. It was a strange time all around. But I came back, and yeah, it's what it is. You know, I'm happy. I'm not actually happy with the algorithm on X at all at the moment. I'm very unhappy about that. But broadly speaking, it's a platform. I get to say stuff. Sometimes people like it. I'm just doing what I've always done.
I've heard, we will get into Northern Ireland, which will be the focus of tonight shortly, but I've heard a lot of people with big accounts have said that recently they're just getting no traction on their posts. People with 100K plus seem to be be getting nothing. Is that your experience?
Yeah. To give you an idea, my reach is back about 90%, most of the time. Now, so happened in the last last week, that reach shot right up. I put a couple of tweets out and they went kind of viral, and that was good. But it seems that whatever way the X algorithm is working, it's punishing all the big accounts and rewarding small accounts. And that's kind of perverse, that if you think about it, because I've got a lot of, I don't want Twitter or X to boost me or anything. All I want is, if I say something, Dan, I want the people that follow me to be able to see it. That's all. And I know that's not happening at the moment. And it's not just me. It's I would say it's almost everyone. It's a very unhappy place at the moment. So, but as I say, I happily exist over in Substack. I exist on podcasts. So it's like, I don't sweat it. And I take a view, as you get older in life, what you realize is, don't get too over-exercised about it in the moment, because things work out, hopefully, for the best. And I do believe
it happens for a reason. Yeah,
exactly.
I have seen, just before we move on, I have seen accounts with 400,000 or 500,000 followers, and someone would put out a post and it would get 10 likes. And I'm looking at these accounts thinking they must just be bots, but that clearly isn't the case, because it's happening widespread, isn't it? So
it is. I mean, I know loads of people similar sized, sort of 250,000, 500,000. I know a couple of guys with 1 or 2 million, and they put out a post, and half a dozen people seem to see it, and I see that in my own as well. And it's like I do believe that, and it's one of the big questions. X is moving to, I mean, I used to complain in the old days that the moderators, pre-Musk, singled you out, and they absolutely did. But that was one thing. Now it's this strange thing called Grok, the X algorithm, and it I don't even know how it properly operates. I mean, according to Musk, it sees every tweet instantly that's posted, and it then decides to let stuff through. And that's where my beef is, because I mean, I've always been a wee bit of someone who goes against the grain, and I'm not going to have an algorithm dictate. I think it's very bad. An algorithm should decide what you see, or what your listeners see, or whatever, or viewers see. I think if you're following someone, you should be able to see what they put out. That's all. That's reasonable. And it's changed around about the 1st of September. And here we are in December, and it ain't gotten better. As I say, I've had a few moments where it seemed okay, but most of the time it's awful. It's a nightmare. So anyway, never mind.
Yeah, hopefully that will change for you, David, and the others. But it's very odd. That's all I can say on that.
Yeah.
So, topic of the day is Northern Ireland. So, people who've watched my past streams, they'll be aware. I've touched on it occasionally. That obviously my accent, you can tell I'm born in England, but I'm of an Irish Catholic background.
Yep.
Growing up, used to hear the stories, see stuff on the telly. I don't know if you saw, BBC actually did a really good thing on the Troubles 1 or 2 years ago. I can't remember what it was called, but the point I'm getting to is you hear the stories, you get both perspectives. Obviously, as a Protestant, I'm quite interested on your take on how things have evolved during your lifetime from when you were born. I mean, living through the Troubles must have been fascinating. It's probably not the right word, awful. I don't know how close. I guess depending on what
memorable is probably the best word.
I guess depending on what part of the country you're in, you could have been right in. If you were in Belfast or somewhere, you're right in with it. But if you're in the countryside, you might have, to some extent.
Not really. So I was born in this little village, Bessbrook, not far from the border, near Newry, and it was a little rural village and all that. But I mean, I suppose the IRA were very active down in that area. They were very busy killing people and blowing things up. My dad, who worked in Newry, he worked in the local telephone exchange. It was blowing up and he was in it. Now he survived with some ear injury, but he did survive. And so around about the mid 70s, we decided the better, more sensible to move away. So we actually did move away, and I moved to a place called Portadown, and I moved to a place called Gervahi Road. Well, talk about, out of the fire and into the sort of the frying pot. Gervahi Road was in the news then, but we'd moved subsequently somewhere else. So I remember it well. I'll tell you the thing I remember the most in Northern Ireland, because it probably affected me in ways I didn't understand at the time, and it probably explains an awful lot about the stuff that people hear from me with regard to Northern Ireland in particular, but terrorism in general, and that is the murders that took place when all the workmen were shot to death back in January the 6th, 1976, down Bestbrook direction, and it was her. I always remember it. My Sunday school teacher was one of them, right? So, and my best friend was his son. So, can you imagine what it's like going to visit your best friend and have a chat about the fact your dad's just been shot to death? So I remember that, and it stayed within me, and I've got an absolute lifelong hatred of those who would take life, of all persuasions, by the way. It didn't matter to me, but that was the moment. I published a book in 2007 called Unionism Decayed, still available on Amazon if you want to buy it, and I detailed that because I can still remember the village, a little village, and there was it was January, Dan. So January's a dark month anyway, but I remember this dark pall descended over the village, and I remember one day there were six funerals up the street one day in 70, and I've never forgotten that. So
how old were you when that happened?
16.
Okay. Yeah.
16-year-old. And you don't forget stuff there was other things I can remember. I can remember being in Uri around about 72, being in newsagents looking at comics, as you do when you're young, and just around the corner the pub was blowing up. I remember that, and the thing I remembered most was all the dust rose up in the little newsagents. I remember so much dust. So I remember. So I was adjacent to some things that happened, but that particular, the Kingsmill atrocity, is the thing that probably stayed most in my mind during those early years. But when it came to Bestbrook, my family lived next door to the Roman Catholic family.
I was going to ask this. Growing up, did you? Because my understanding is that there was some mixing.
Yeah.
Up until a certain point when everything became more segregated again.
Yeah, there was mix. I as a youngster, I mixed with. We just all mixed together. There was no divide. Not in that village. But once the murders started, and the relentless murders of neighbors and policemen and stuff, it did cause stress and problems. But the irony was that, as I say, we had Roman Catholics actually both sides of us, and on the other side, their eldest son was sergeant he was a Roman Catholic guy in the British Army.
Yeah,
and he couldn't even come home.
So he would have probably been hated more than
He would have been shot. He was over in Germany. Yeah. So I've always kind of maintained. I like to think a sort of a balance. And then once I developed into the political sphere and got into that, I kept that, and I've never lost it. My view is, I take the biblical view: murder's wrong. You shouldn't be killing anybody. And those who set out to take life should forfeit their life. I think that as well. And it's just that Northern Ireland did go through those years, Dan. From '69, I suppose, through to the mid-90s, and there were some awful things happened. And I've got so many friends of my age that lived through that. And I suppose the thing is, we're the lucky ones. We lived through it. I can visit graveyards, and there's the people who didn't live through it. So that's how it was. But then it's such a weird thing, because I hear myself talking about it like this, and it sounds grim because it was sort of grim. But when you're young, it's amazing how resilient you are.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, I got myself into such a strange scenario in the 90s when the peace process came along, and this was to bring an end to all the killing, and I absolutely opposed it. So
that was going to be a question for later. How did you vote the referendum?
Yeah. But I opposed it because of what had gone through. I didn't want to see killers rewarded. I didn't want to see terrorism pandered to. So that's always been my view, Dan. I've always taken that approach. I just think the lesson of history is that appeasement is wrong. But I mean, no, you look back on it. I look back on it. Northern Ireland, a very small little country, part of the UK, subject to all the power of the British establishment, the Irish establishment, the American establishment, the emerging European Union establishment. Yeah, it was obvious that whatever they wanted to do here, they would do. But my only thing is, I opposed it all the way, every part of the way. I opposed it, and I'm proud of it.
So do you see the Good Friday Agreement as maybe a reward for the IRA's actions? Is that how you saw it?
Predominantly the IRA, but it rewarded the UVF and the UDA as well. So all the terrorist groups got rich pickings out of it, which I might find it's morally wrong. I remember at the time when this was happening, there was a political campaign, and I was involved in it with Bob McCartney, Peter Robinson, people like that. And the line was, nothing which is morally wrong can be politically right. And okay, so it might be clunky, but there's a substance to that. Yeah. If it's morally wrong, how is it political? The only word is, it's expedient. It's expedient. It's realpolitik. And that's what it was. It was absolutely realpolitik. And I know that it brought the Troubles more or less to an end. It did. There was lots of killings afterwards. Let's be honest. But
were they hushed up in order to keep?
Yeah. And there's still the odd thing that goes on, but like on a scale of 0 to 10, if it was 10 back in 1990, it was down to about 1 in 2000. So the aim was achieved. But the only reason the aim was achieved was the terrorists were in government. No, I didn't think that was a good result. I wasn't happy about that at all. But that's what it was, and it's stayed like that ever since. There's this. I still think we have a fractured society. I think, sometimes I think. I mean, some stuff is so sad that it makes me laugh. On X the other day, I had an encounter with some ardent Republican, which made me laugh. One of these 33 county Republicans, and his view was he put up a picture of like 30, the island of Ireland with the tricolour on it. And soon, and I said to him, well, you may as well put the flag of Somalia on it, because the way this country island's changing, you just are clueless. Irish Republican is passé. I think to a significant degree, unionism is passé as well. I think the world's moved on, but Northern Ireland, I know it hasn't. And yes, I am of a unionist family, of course, but I see things a wee bit different from a lot of people, and I kind of take the view, yes, I'm proud of our British roots. I'm proud of a lot of our history. And I enjoy the 12th of July for what it is. But I've got issues with that as well. And so, I just see the world.
Sorry, can you touch on, what do you mean you've got issues with the 12th of July? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it's all very well saying no surrender when you've surrendered, isn't it? I mean, for example, going back, I can't remember what year it was, but do you remember the whole Drumcree standoff? Do you remember when there was the Orange Parade was stopped coming down the Garfahi Road in Portadown? But this was a big moment. And I remember it vividly because I used to be over with I wasn't in the Orange Order. I'm a Marxist. I would never belong to any club that would have me, right? So I'm not in the Orange Order, but my dad was. But on that occasion, I felt the Orange Order should never have compromised. They should never have just sort of said, oh, well, we'll just sit here forever. I believe in action. They should have been more on the front foot. So it's almost like it's a folk event. It's almost like it's like maybe they'll put it in Ulster Folk Park and they can all walk around in Ulster Folk Park. Now, I know that will annoy some of them, but that's tough. I don't care. I would say I'm more at core hardline loyalist than many of those who are in the Orange Order, because I see it in absolute terms. If you believe in liberty and whatnot, then you should be allowed to walk down a road. Nobody owns the roads, and in fact, anyone can walk down the road. It doesn't have to be Orange; it could be anything. Anyone.
Was that stopped because the area had changed so much? It was mainly a Catholic area now. Is that why?
Yeah, it was, because it changed between, as I say, I moved there in about 76 or whatever, and it was more or less Protestant, but it did move, it did change, and yes, you're absolutely right. The area changed, Dan, but the road never changed. The road, and if anyone who knows that area, and I know it extremely well, the road doesn't go through a housing estate. It's an arterial road. In fact, it used to be it used to be way back, the main road into Portadown. That's what it was. It was main road. So, I appreciate there's people other side, living in estates, sort of peripheral to the road, who may have been upset about it. But I mean, they need to get over their hurt feelings. Honestly, I have no sympathy. It's different if you're walking. If someone said, let's have an orange parade up the Falls Road. I mean, yeah, there's common sense. But that was my take on it. I felt they had an absolute right to free assembly, and they compromised on that. And the other thing it showed to me was how deeply schismed unionism was. Even then, it was deeply schismed. You had UUP, DUP, then you had UK Unionist Party with Robert McCartney, all different, and conquer and divide is the ultimate tactic. And so I think unionism is deeply weakened by the fact that over the decades, at any rate, it was schismed. It was, when the UUP were in power, they were hopeless. And then the DUP got in power, and then they were hopeless. So I'm not sure, what the advantage to the schisms are.
When you say they're hopeless, do you see that the loyalist leadership is weak then at the moment, or has been for years?
I don't see any leadership. Do you see no leadership at all? I mean, it seems to be the primary aim of unionist politicians is to make sure that the Stormont circus continues, and they keep getting their salaries, and they keep pretending at being politicians at Stormont. That's the main purpose of unionism, as far as I can see. It's not certainly helping the unionist people, or at best marginally. I don't think so anyway. I've always opposed Stormont. I'd like to see it demolished. I oppose devolution. I'd like to see Holyrood, the Welsh Assembly, all gone. I believe in a unitary United Kingdom with Westminster, the mother of parliaments, having necessary adjustments to look after the individual components. But remember, it was Tony Blair that brought this devolution into play, and I ain't no fan of Tony Blair.
Wouldn't you say, in some senses, that devolution did help prevent or at least postpone some measures which the unionists didn't want? So if we look at gay marriage, for example, which Westminster introduced years and years ago, Northern Ireland was able to stop that for years. I don't know what the law on abortion is in Northern Ireland at the moment. I know it's changed. It's changed now this year, where women can't actually get penalised in the 8th or 9th month if they do something. So I understand what you're saying. You'd rather be ruled from London, but wouldn't you say there's certain sicknesses that have been stopped?
I used to argue for what would be called a Northern Ireland Grand Committee at Westminster, so that issues such as those that you've just raised would be discussed on the Northern Ireland Grand Committee. And if it couldn't go through that committee, then it wouldn't go into Parliament for a vote. So on that logic, they wouldn't have been able to instigate some of the things that I totally disagree with, like gay marriage, and like the abortion stuff. But I don't know. I think devolution is is too high a price to pay just to stop those things. I mean, look, the administration of Stormont, it makes me laugh. I used to get cross about it, but as a line from a song I like says, I used to be disgusted, but now I try to be amused. And boy, am I amused at the shenanigans up at Stormont. It's a circus. I see the stuff, and they stand up and they can't even speak properly. They have no gravitas at all about them. And I'm talking about nearly all of them. And you know, and then the local media sort of, you know, give their great consideration to the thoughts of these different ministers. I mean, I ran a business for many, many years. I would employ these people to clean the toilet, and they're standing up at Stormont telling us what their strategies are going to be. Their strategies. Spur me their strategies and spur me Stormont. Now, that doesn't go down well in the unionist community. If you oppose Stormont, but then I've always been a maverick like that. You know, if I thought Stormont was going to be a bulwark for the union, then I might think differently. But it's not been. It's not been. It's sitting there, and the union gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's the truth of the matter. And no unionist can contradict me in that, because that's factually the case.
Are you a fan of Jim Allister?
Yeah, well, I was in Jim's party. Jim and I. Okay. I've been. I know I said I was a Marxist because I've not been in any party that would have me. But there were two parties I was in. I was with Robert McCartney, UK Unionist Party, which was kind of like the sister party of Nigel Farage's UKIP, the Northern Irish kind of version of it. I was a deputy leader with Bob, and I did that during the whole peace process. So that's when I was involved in stuff. Well, not the negotiations, because we opposed the negotiations, but I was and then I withdrew at the turn of the millennium. I said to myself, right, I said, I'm out of politics. I'm sick of this. And then 10 years later, I was asked to go into Jim Allister's party, and I did. Okay. And I like Jim, and I still like Jim. And I found the TUV to be, not the same. The UK Unionist Party was very pluralist. It wasn't really for heavily religious as such, because Robert McCartney wasn't particularly. But I liked him. But I liked Jim, and Jim was Free P, and so was I, for that matter, at that point. So I joined TUV, spent a couple of years with the TUV, gained notoriety for things that I said. If just for laughs, for extra laughs, Google David Vance, Belfast Telegraph, and you'll see some headlines. He called the people in Derry skivers. Yeah, so they were. And a TUV candidate, almost TUV candidate. They did, the character assassination that they're doing in Nigel Farage at the moment, because something he said 50 years ago when he was in school, right? The Belfast Telegraph, BBC, they love to do that in me. He said something that hurt somebody's feelings somewhere. Oh, yeah, well, it didn't blow up and kill a couple of thousand people, did it? But all the same, he said hurty words. So I was in the TUV, and then, to be honest with you, what it proved to me was I shouldn't be in any political party. I just do my own stuff, Which
did you get too much stick from your own, like from that party when you were saying stuff? Were they like, David, you need to tone it down a bit?
No. The only thing I would say is something that Churchill observed back, way back, I think in the 1930s, in Parliament. He said, something along the words along the lines of, my opponents sit over there pointing to the opposition benches, but my enemies are behind me. Churchill said that. And I'm not saying, like, I'm not trying to be too theatrical, and I'm not talking about Jim for a second, but I just couldn't be bothered with all the internecine squabbling, the branch network and stuff like that. I just couldn't be bothered with it, And so, to be honest with you, I was glad to get out of frontline politics, because then I could say whatever I wanted, and there was absolutely no, sort of limitations on me. But I mean, I remember being interviewed about what's the TUV's strategy on the economy and stuff like this by Stephen Nolan, a 1 hour grilling and that there, as if, and it's so stupid, because the TUV was never going to win power. The TUV was never going to say why did the BBC even do this stupid stuff? It's just it's empty theatrics is what it is. But I can still remember that. I remember going up to see Nolan to do this 1 hour, and I had a really bad cold, a really bad chest cold, just about able to make it through, talking about, what are we going to do to bring down inflation? Well, nothing. We're not the Bank of England. And I'm looking at Nolan thinking, why are you asking me stupid questions? But you can't say that when you're in frontline
You're
politics.
live, yeah. Did you say afterwards? Do you say off camera afterwards? Yeah.
Yes, but and certainly, so when I left the TUV, I could absolutely say what I wanted, So I suppose it's the sense of freedom that not signing up to a particular party gives you, and that's kind of where that's where I've been. I dabbled for a few. I dabbled in politics, but I prefer just being able to speak freely myself.
No, that's fair enough. This must be a sense of freedom, not being associated with a party in that sense. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
David, you mentioned about the Republican doing the 32 county thing over a map of Ireland. So,
yeah.
So I know that Ireland's obviously had issues, is a light word to put it, with immigration, mass immigration.
Yeah, that's right.
We've seen. I mean, the Algerian guy. I don't think we've ever seen a picture of that man who stabbed the children outside the school.
Nope, they had that.
We've had lots of civil conflict, low level rioting all over the country. Has the experience in Northern Ireland been the same? I know earlier this year we had, I think it was Roma Gypsies' houses got attacked in a Protestant village or town.
Oh, yeah. Well, you make that's really interesting subject, that, because what happened in Ballymena was one of those moments where it looked like we could topple back into the sort of troubles that we had. And as my understanding of what happened there is that essentially, yes, it was Roma gypsy drug dealers, as far as I can best understand, had moved into a particular street in Ballymena, which is a very traditional Northern Ireland town. And then they had, I think some of the members of that gang had sexually attacked or abused a local girl, and the local community kicked off. Which I completely understand. I mean, I don't approve of violence. I have to say that caveat out there. Not approving of violence. But listen, if the government won't defend our kids or women and children, then what do you expect? And so the situation is really fascinating for me, because I see. I mean, I have loads of friends in Southern Ireland. Believe you me, contrary to the thing. I mean, during COVID years, I had great alliances with people down there who, similarly to myself, opposed the draconian lockdowns and all that stuff. So we kind of have crossed over and things like that. But I see the Irish Republic being hollowed out from within and being turned into this kind of mass migrant hellhole, where, for example, by 2035, I think it is, the majority of young people 18 to 25 won't be Irish natives, right? And there's a line I use a lot: demography is destiny. Ireland's destiny, demographic destiny, is not to be Ireland. And because it's a small population of, what is it, 5 million? Yeah. So that demographic change can happen very quickly.
Right.
And so there's that. And then the other thing, which is a sweet irony of sweet ironies, to do with the Northern Ireland angle, Flip. It turns out that a lot of these, what the media call asylum seekers, and which I call illegal invaders, they're coming across from France up into Dover and up the UK, coming across Liverpool to Belfast. Then they're getting the bus from Belfast down to Dublin. And the Irish government said, I think it was the other week, 85%, I think that was the figure they quoted, 85% of migrants are coming from the north. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, there's a reason for that, because you guys said that the border must be absolutely transparent. There mustn't be anybody stopped at the border, remember, because of Brexit. So we had this open border. So honestly, think about that. So you've insisted on an open border, otherwise the troubles would start back, or so we were told in 2016, 17. So you have an open border, and now that open border is being exploited by all Somalis, Eritreans, Ethiopians, every night creed, and they're heading down to Dublin. And the only way to stop that would be to have a border now, wouldn't it? But to have a border would be to go against the Irish political narrative. So cake and eat it doesn't work. And that's where we are. So
I've travelled to Dublin probably since the late noughties, early tens.
Yeah.
And the place, when was I last in Dublin? 2019. It's unrecognisable.
Oh,
it's changed so much. It begs belief.
yeah. I mean, listen. I mean, I've been in Dublin certainly up until COVID, so up until 2020, like every month, all the time in Dublin. Business interests in Dublin, and you can see Dublin was changing. Then you get to 2020, and it just seems to accelerate. And and so I've been there recently, the last couple of years, and it is more like Mogadishu than Dublin. It's very sad, but it's as I said, demography is destiny. I mean, there are housing estates in the west of Dublin, out at Tala, where the grocery vans dare not go, otherwise they will be hijacked. So I mean, Ireland is a failing. Donald Trump called it out really well there yesterday. Several European countries are dysfunctional and failing. Ireland happens to be one of them. And so it really amuses me that Irish Republicans don't see that. They're so wrapped up in their 1916 mindset that they don't realize. That was the point really I had a go at that guy on X, that do you don't understand what's happening in your own country? Are you so blinded by hatred of Britain? If you want to hate Britain, that's fine. Like, I'm not saying you can't, but your own country's being chiseled out and destroyed from within, and all you can do is bitch about what's happening. In Northern. Yeah. So yeah, I think Irish republicanism is a bit like unionism. It's per se. Its time has come and gone, but it doesn't know it yet. But it will do, because the demography by 2050. Who's going to be in Ireland then?
Can I pick you up on one comment which I hear a lot online, and I struggle to get my head around it? Is the word invader?
Yeah,
I can illegal immigrants, sure, but when you say the word invader, it's something. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard.
I'll let you explain it. I don't get it.
Let me explain. Now, let me explain. First of all, none of these people are asylum seekers, which the media consistently call them asylum seekers, because they've traveled to get to the UK. They've traveled through other safe countries, notably France. I mean, I was in France 3 weeks ago. It's not at war. Trust me. Paris is not at war. Very nice, actually. So they're not.
Paris is not nice. Paris is awful.
Well, if you go down to the Tuileries and you go to Verdun Square, believe you me, there are nice places in it. There, maybe if you went to Saint Denis, go up to Saint Denis at New Year's Eve, see what happens here. Yeah, I know, but
sorry, I'll just touch on this before I let you finish. I went a few years ago with my girlfriend at the time, she's now my wife, and she'd been to Paris before and I hadn't. And there's all this bulletproof glass around the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
And she's looking at it going, what on earth's this? And I'm like, why? She's like, you used to be able to walk underneath it, the Eiffel Tower. And I was like, I've just never seen that because of when I went.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. 100%. Yeah. It's just that I've been going to Paris for so many years. I kind of know the good bits to go to and not the good bits to go to. Hopefully. But I'll take your point. But
sorry, the invader bit. Sorry, I couldn't let the Paris good bit fly. Sorry.
So these people coming here, they are illegal migrants. We can agree on that. Yeah. But the thing is, though, that you have to ask yourself, well, okay, they're illegal because they're breaking the law to come here. So that's factual. That's not there's nothing wrong with saying that. They're illegal migrants. But why? What is their raison d'etre to be here? That is my question. And we see from the stats that the overwhelming number of the people who are arriving are young men of military age, 18 to 30, something in the region of 75% or of that age group. Young men of fighting age are the people who are coming here. Are they coming here? Why are they coming here exactly? And so I see it as a kind of as an invasion. I mean, I find it ironic that, for example, they're being put up in Crowthorne barracks. Where would you put an invading army? Can I ask you, Dan? Oh, I know. Let's put them in a barracks. So I know it's an incendiary term. I'm well aware of it. But sometimes I think it's apt because the media know when they call them asylum seekers, they're just lying. And, so in a way, it's trying to trump the media and say, well, come on, tell me why they're not invaders then. Tell me why who asked them to come here? When did the British people say, do you know what we need? We need more of these people from Somalia, Nigeria, et cetera, et cetera. We never did.
So
So it is invasion.
if we take, there's a lot of Albanians coming over to set up
Yeah.
hairdressers,
Yeah.
that nature. I still don't see how they're coming here because it's an easy life. The police are weak. They can do their drug trade and probably, get a slap on. But I don't see it as an invasion in that. How are those people, for example, invaders? Like, that's just something I don't. And I think when sometimes people use that language, it makes people that might be on the line actually switch off.
Well, okay, let's deal with that. The Albanians, I completely agree with you, by the way. I totally agree. You mean, and there is obviously an element in all of these situations where people think they can come here and have a better life. Like that's also fair enough to say. It's just that the vast majority don't. That's the truth of the matter. When you look at what the Afghanis are coming here for, they're not coming here to set up little businesses. Like, they're really not. They're here for the welfare. They're here to rip us off. The recent lifting of the two-child welfare cap, for example, I mean, that's absolutely aimed at migrants. But think about invasion. So back in World War II, how did we fight back against the Germans? Well, we invaded northern France, didn't we? How did we do that? Well, we sent a flotilla across the English Channel. What's been coming across the English Channel for the last 4 or 5 years?
Sorry, Dave, but that was in like a declared war where men were going with arms, getting off the boat with arms. That's not the case here. So why would you consider it?
Well, okay, it's a declared. Well, that was a declared war, right? Okay, but the mode of invasion was boats. I see it as the same. I really do, and I can understand how you may feel it. I detect you feel it's incendiary, and if I said illegal migration, you'd be happier. But I stand by the word invade. So many of them are invaders. Listen, the other day, you seen that what happened in Leamington Spa. Did you see that story about the 15-year-old girl?
Yeah,
shocking. Two Afghan invaders is how I see them, and yeah, it is. But the way the semantics of what they are is a bit of a detour. It's what they do. It's what they do, Dan. It's what they do. If people came here and I believe completely in integration. If you come into the country, you integrate, you assimilate, you accept its laws, you accept its traditions. That's I think that's fair. And historically, that's how it's worked. That's not how it's working anymore. The people, when you have Sharia courts being set up in the UK, for example, that's not integration. It's really not. It's setting up a parallel judicial system. So, so it's the fact that this immigration we have, this mass immigration we have, it's not about assimilation, and I think it's about conquering. That's what I honestly think. By but put it another way, I'll not be here. You can tell me. But by 2080 or so, we're going to be a minority white country.
Might be.
Might be. I won't. The ghost of David Vance will still be looking down. And will that be good or bad? Well, I don't know. And I'm not using this in a racial angle. I'm just simply saying that a country is, Dan, it is the result of generations, centuries, in the case of England, centuries and centuries of people going back, 1,000 years. That's what England is. And once that gene pool is removed, whatever England is, it's not what it was. It's not what it was. And Ireland will be the quicker version of that. I'll probably see what happens to Ireland because it'll happen so much quicker. So this is why I'm very much aligned to the Donald Trump line in this. I think we do have to protect our borders. We have to make sure that the only people that come in are people that wish us well and who will assimilate and integrate. That's what Trump thinks. That's what I think. There are some politicians maybe who think that in the UK, like Farage maybe. But, yeah, that's where I am on it.
There's a few things I could say there. One would be, do you think Farage is biting his tongue compared to what he actually thinks? But we'll park that for now. I think with Ireland, because the mass immigration, I said this on another stream, the mass immigration into Ireland's happened over such a short period of time.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say it's far more likely one day. I mean, the Algerian guy stabbing the kids, which is obvious. what am I trying to say? The Irish aren't used to that. Like, obviously, they're just not. Whatever you say about the IRA, they would never have. Like, as far as I'm aware, they wouldn't have done such things to. Unless you probably know more than me, they wouldn't. Suicide bombings, it was not something I'm aware the IRA did either.
No.
So,
well, there's a little bit, but not much.
A little, sure, in general. And if we just rewind a bit to the Ballymena stuff, where you've said, this is where, again, it's not encouraging violence, but do you think violence gets results? Where the people whose homes were attacked, it was just property, it wasn't people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if
it gets results, doesn't it?
I mean, does violence get results? Well, tell me how Sinn Féin got into government then. Tell me more about that.
Yeah,
so the answer is it does. I mean, it shouldn't. And as someone who doesn't want violence, it's lamentable, but it's the truth as well. And you know, there was that moment in Ballymena where I felt quite proud of not all, but many people in those communities, because you could see that they were just for one moment, Dan, they were just sort of like woken up and said, nah, we're not going to do this. We are not going to do this. Now, you know, I know they were demonizing the media, but that's what I expect from the media. In a way, it's a pity the rest of the UK wouldn't waken up at least to the scale of recognizing there's a problem and we need to deal with the problem. I mean, I've always been a great advocate of law and order. So I believe that it's for for the government and the police to deal with situations like we have, but they resolutely refuse to do that. So, you know, so they left the people in Ballymena to basically rot, and the people of Ballymena for that couple of days, you could just tell. And so, Dan, it's still there out there. There is a resilience in Northern Irish, especially the unionist population, which sort of suggests you don't push us too far because you never know what might happen. And I think, like at my age, I can say that. But the people who were out sort of protesting in Ballymena were a hell of a lot younger than me. They were maybe even younger than you, although you look very young to me. Everyone does. But, you know, so I think there's a thing out there, and I'm not even, and it's a spirit. And I mean, I've seen it elsewhere. I've been at a few events in London in the past, say, year. A Tommy Robinson rally I've been at in Trafalgar Square. And you saw the same, it's a kind of an outburst of patriotism, just the love for your country, not a hatred of the other person, but just, I love my country. I love my culture. I want this. You know, and so I know it exists in England as well, and I'm sure it's in Scotland and Wales, and it's certainly here in Northern Ireland. And Ballymena just for me was a little example of how if you push people too far, then you're going to get a kickback. And yeah, and they did. And of course, the punchline was the Albanians. I can't remember now who they were, the drug dealers, but. They were moved on, let's say, and that was good.
I think it was Roma Gypsies from memory. In Ballymena, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware they were drug dealers. I've never heard that on the mainstream.
Yeah. But the mainstream, yeah, exactly. But that's the whole point. The mainstream sanitize it, and we've seen that. I mean, we saw it. I mean, we've talked about Ballymena, but the possibly the worst one of all was what happened at the end of July 2024 when the three little schoolgirls in Southport were hacked to death by a second-generation Rwandan migrant, and he was a second-generation Rwandan migrant. And again, you saw like people flaring up. So I just think that, as I say, I'm a peaceful person. I don't believe in violence, but I think if government, the first responsibility of government is to protect its people. If the government refuses to do its primary responsibility, honestly, do not complain when others take it into their own hands. You can't complain because you've opted out.
We were looking into nurseries. I've got an 18-month-old. We were looking into nurseries the other week, and one of the it's so tragic, but you have to ask it. I asked the lady, I said, is the front door locked? Can anyone just walk in through it? They're like, no, it's locked, absolutely, because we live in a world now where someone can literally just walk through like a dance class of little girls and do that. And it's just, I mean, this is it's related but separate, talking about the media with Axel Rudy Cabana, the way they showed him as a little schoolboy. And then the day of his trial, we saw what the rat actually looked like. And And then I think about, I used to watch stuff on documentaries about when the grooming gang stuff was coming out and how back in the 70s and 80s, the English were portrayed. And the people complaining about it were portrayed as the scummiest, rudest, low class. And then they'd go from the English side and they'd pan it over to the Pakistani community. And they'd show little children running around. They wouldn't be showing the gangs of men who were doing. No. They'd show like Pakistani children in Birmingham or Bradford or wherever. And it's only as time goes on and I think social media has exposed a lot of the media. I mean, it's quite hard. It's quite hard work when I speak to people of maybe your generation, David, who they just don't see the stuff that the younger ones see on social media. And sometimes it's like talking to a brick wall to them. They look at me like I'm crazy. Some of the things I say.
No, but the good thing is, I mean, my generation, the boomer generation, they're the people still watching the BBC and stuff. Yeah. But again, I'm unusual and I don't watch any of it. Social media has been a blessing. Of course, and social media has helped expose so much of this, Dan. And that's the reason why the starting in Australia yesterday or today, I think it was, that social media bans for kids 16 and under. The government doesn't like the idea that you might go to Facebook or X or YouTube or whatever and get information that it doesn't approve of, that might show certain things in a different light. So, I mean, we're living through an information war. I think it's being fought out in social media. I also think, I think the mainstream's dead. But no, like again, to jump back a wee bit to 2020, like what 2020 showed me was on the COVID thing that people were almost being hypnotized. The people who were most observant to wear a mask, stay, 10 miles away from your nearest relative. They were the people watching the BBC, watching ITV. They were boomers and they were watching it, and you could see how it works. Didn't work as easy in social media. It's harder because if not for no other reason, there's people like me who'll turn up and say, "Listen, I don't believe in any of this. It's all nonsense." And okay, they took me down because they said
they just got rid of it. They just removed everything. Anything,
just like that.
All the press was all one-sided.
Yep.
Everything.
It was absolutely shocking, and that's why. But it does show you that the social media platforms at least give us some opportunity to hear different views. You see, I've always argued you don't have to agree with anything I say. You're more than welcome to disagree with me, but at least let me have my say. And maybe some people will take comfort or even interest in what I say. Mainstream media doesn't work like that. Mainstream media is narrative. And, for I'll tell you, the very first thing I ever did, right about the time I was leaving the TUV or whatever, back in 1999, it was actually before that, I set up a blog back in the days of blogs. That dates me. It's still going though, mind you. It's called biasbbbc.com. And I thought biased BBC because I was outraged by the BBC even then. So even in my younger years, I realized this is an absolute crock and I'm not going to ignore it. And I discovered, my goodness, there's so many people. We got great numbers coming to visit the site. And so I understand that, the media is central to all of this. And that's why it's really good. You people like you do what you do, Dan, and others do what they do and put out different points of view. Because so much of that which you hear in the mainstream, it's all the same. No one will ever say half the stuff I've said to you, and I could say it 10 times more if I wanted.
Absolutely. No, it's true. Thank you, David. I know you've touched on how it's probably not as relevant when you said the Republican doing the 32 county thing, but it moves on to my next question, I guess. With the dwindling Protestant population, loyalist population, whatever you want to call it, compared to the Irish Catholics, do you ever see a scenario where there will be a border referendum?
Nah.
Never.
No, I don't. I think it comes back to the Ballymena thing. Do you really want to push it that far to see what happens? Do you really want to do that? Plus, here's the other thing. Again, you shouldn't. Well, not you, but one shouldn't stereotype people. Like, there are lots of Roman Catholic people I know who have grown up with them, and they're at my age in life, so they've all, achieved lots of good things, and they've got families, grown up families, and they've got grandkids, and they're very invested in Northern Ireland. I do not believe those people would, for a second, vote to give up that which they have for some kind of ideological reason. Just like most Scots did not vote for Indy, because most people are kind of sensible. And so yeah, you can be passionate and have your own views, but I'm really not that concerned about border polls, and I completely ignore there's so much here in Northern Ireland, I would say, where Protestants are being browbeaten into thinking, oh, it's inevitable, oh, it's going to happen any day now, it's going to happen oh really, the people wanting to vote for the south of Ireland to be Irish, they're going to happy to pay €50 for a trip to the GP. They're happy happy to give up your benefits, happy to do all that. No, you're not, because you're hypocrites. And so there'll be a section. I don't know what the percentage would be if it was held tomorrow, but it doesn't bother me.
I was actually going to. Have you got a figure in your head? If it was
one tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Well, they'll say, oh, well, the demography, blah, blah, blah. I would say it would go about 60-40, something like that, 60-40 in favor of staying.
That's not a million. Okay, that's. I thought based on what you were saying before that, you were going to say something like 70-30. So 60-40 is not a million miles away in like another generation, maybe.
Yeah, I guess I'd be basing it on, maybe there's difference between us, Dan. I'd be basing it on all the Roman Catholic people that I know of my generation and where they would be on the issue. But it's harder for me to say what it's like for the generation below me. I don't know, but I still think that I'll tell you something. People vote with their wallets. They vote with their wallets.
Economics.
When it comes down to it, they can say all sort of things, all brave things in public. Then and it is true. Northern Ireland. I mean, this is a whole different conversation. We're not have time to go into it. But one of my problems about this country is it's a welfare basket case, which I've always argued against. So many people are reliant on benefits. There's not enough entrepreneurs. There's not enough good jobs. There's so much wrong at that level that actually I think people should be focused on, rather than, oh, I want to be in a 32 county Ireland, or oh, I want to, that's what, and there's the problem there, and it's a transgenerational problem. I mean, I got criticized for saying it, but I was right that a society that's so reliant on welfare is not a healthy society. People complain about the Barnett. I opposed the Barnett formula. I'm sure you're familiar with the. Are you familiar with it? Yeah. See, again, I always enjoyed the fact that I think that England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland should be treated exactly the same. And I disagree with disproportionate amounts of money being transferred from English taxpayers to Northern Ireland. We're the worst one. Scotland second worst, and then down to Wales. So. I've always believed in a strange kind of fiscal equality. I mean, why should the English taxpayer underwrite Scotland or Northern Ireland? Why should they? Sure. I think we should be generating the income, the revenue, the jobs, the better society. We should be doing that. But that means a healthy private sector. Northern Ireland has got, and it's not even necessarily the fault of the people, Dan. The Troubles destroyed so much private sector business that we've never really caught back up with it. Yes, I know there's some, but there's not enough. And the public sector is still too big here. So, there's structural change that has to happen and stuff like that to make Northern Ireland a fully functional entity, whether it's in the UK or anywhere else for that matter. And I don't hear too many people talk about that.
I think I agree. If it was held tomorrow, in favour of the union would win. I'm just wondering if one or two more generations pass where I might be wrong. I think Catholics are actually a majority in Northern Ireland already. I might be wrong.
I think they are. Yeah, I think about 55% to 49 or something. I don't know, something like that.
I'm just wondering.
Define Catholic. Does that mean practicing Catholic?
Okay. We'll say Irish and British. I'll take the point for simplicity. I'm wondering if in another generation where this percentages swing a bit again, and maybe it's 58 plays 42 in demographic terms, would that then be enough to get the Republican side over the line?
Yeah, but they can't go over the line. It's impossible, because by that point, Ireland will be essentially Somalia, so it won't matter. So the game's lost. They've lost the game, and they haven't figured it out. They need to take the Ireland needs to bring back Ireland. That's what Ireland. It needs to be focused on Ireland. It shouldn't be focused on extraterritorial entities like Northern Ireland. And we need to focus on making Northern Ireland better. And the UK itself needs to focus on, fulfilling the promise of Brexit and all the stuff that's been abandoned in the past 10 years. So there's an awful lot of things going on. I don't see it in black and white border poles and stuff. I see it much more broadly.
It's true what you're saying. I'm just wondering, it's a complete, we won't talk about it now, the Conor McGregor thing being not allowed to stand. And then you see it in France with Marine Le Pen being dropped. It's when they really do fear the outsider. They just make the rules up as they go along.
They do. And to be fair, I mean, the Irish political establishment is particularly grim. I mean, I don't like it here, but Ireland's particularly grim. And the media, the mainstream media is so controlled. I mean, they literally pay RTE and some of the press. They get paid, just like in Canada. So I think you've got a lack of democracy in Southern Ireland, which, I mean, I put out a thing today I saw about the fact that, Simon Harris was defending the fact that they've got a program in schools. They're spending X amount on educating young Irish boys and girls to understand their white privilege.
What?
White privilege? Are you kidding me? And
No.
so this is the toxicity of the Irish political system, and you saw it in the Irish presidential election as well. There's a democratic deficit in Ireland. I think a significant chunk of the Irish people are disenfranchised anyway. But Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin, I mean, and Labour, it's so left wing. There's not even a right wing party. You couldn't have a reform in Southern Ireland. That tells you something about it. So Ireland's dysfunction is I'm afraid, dysfunctional, and I don't want that. I'd like it to be a proper functioning country. I mean, I wouldn't have minded if someone.
Sorry,
yeah.
Sorry, Dave. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm wondering though, is that work in the Irish's favour one day? Because there's not a safety valve. There's not a Tory party or a reform.
Yeah. I take your point.
Possibly.
It may come to that, but I tell you, whatever's going to happen, Dan, it's going to happen quite quickly in Ireland. It's going to happen in, we're just talking probably single years. You cannot keep what's going on in Ireland. You can't allow that to continue and not expect there to be some kickback. People always talked about, the fighting Irish, reputation for fighting Irish. Somehow or another that went away. Could it be the fluoride in the water? I don't know. But I wouldn't underestimate the Irish. I think they do have resilience. They do have backbone, just like the people of Northern Ireland have resilience and backbone. And sometimes, the thing that triggers it is the thing that you don't see. No one saw the Ballymena riots coming. Nobody. But you saw what happened. And some of the horrific things we see happening in the Irish Republic might just trigger things as well. Yes, the mainstream media will try to clamp it down, and has been, and the government the same. But you never know what's going to happen. That probably to sort of wrap things up. The thing that keeps me going is that you never know what's going to happen next. You know what I mean? We're talking here tonight, and you're talking all these things, and you see it as, well, this is probably going to happen, and this. But actually, who knows? Who knows? The fun I take is to be able to then, whenever it happens, to turn around and say, well, isn't this interesting? Let's talk about this. So that's what I keep continuing doing, And sometimes you can sort of forecast where we're going. Like the UK is going into an absolute hot mess with a Labour government that's incredibly unpopular, less popular than bubonic plague. And that's only after 18 months. And you think, how's that going to last for 5 years? I don't think it will. There's so much stuff going on. And so from my point of view, it's great content. That's all I'm loving it. The more chaos, bring the chaos on.
I think it will last. I think there's any chance they'll call an early election, unfortunately.
Unless there's a financial run on the pound in 2027. That's the thing. You got to watch for that.
Is that your call, your prediction?
I think it's possible. Labour obviously won't call one. You absolutely guaranteed. No way. But Rachel Reeves' budgets, at least two budgets, are very crucifying for the British economy. And as she's she's put so much on the last couple of years in power. She's put it so much savings she's going to bring into the last couple of years. But the money markets aren't stupid, and I feel that the UK is only 2 quarters away from financial recession, and all kinds of stuff can happen then. So I don't know. I mean, my American friend said to me, "Look, David, you got to keep a sense of this. We had Joe Biden from 2020 to 2024, and we survived. So you're going to have Keir Starmer from 24 to 29, and you'll survive." And that's probably true, Dan. But I live in hope that there might be, just for the laughs, an additional election, which would be entered. And we will have the elections in Scotland and Wales next year as well. Don't forget, next May, which will be seismic, I think. So lots of stuff to look forward to.
Lots going on. No, absolutely. David, thank you very much for your time tonight. I know you've obviously got a big platform as it is, but where can people find you who are watching live or on replay?
So probably the best place to find me is David on X, and just stick my name in. You'll find me. Okay, you'll get me there. But listen, Dan, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And can I wish you every success in your own platforms? I love the fact that much younger people than me are doing the stuff that I started to do way back in the day, and I'm sure you'll have a very successful future doing this as well. So thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for being here, David, and thanks everyone for watching, and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.